Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to the University of Chicago's Volunteer Caucus and to our Alumni Schools Committee presentation. My name is Carol Wilinski. I'm the Alumni Schools Committee Director, and I'm also an Associate Director in the Admissions Office, and I'm a graduate of the class of 1977. What we'd like to do this morning is provide a brief overview of the Alumni Schools Committee and talk a little bit about the different types of recruiting-related activities that ASC volunteers can become involved in. We are supposed to have a mix of people in the audience today. Some are current volunteers, and others are people who've just signed up, and others are shopping and would like to have more information before they decide whether they're going to join us. So we're hoping that our presentation today will be useful and informative regardless of whatever stage you're in your life with the Alumni Schools Committee. I wanted to mention that this afternoon we're going to be hosting a roundtable at 1:45. It will allow us to go into a little bit more depth about some of the topics that we introduced this morning. We're going to be covering a lot of material this morning in a short period of time, so we wanted to give a few minutes for questions at the end, but then also provide an opportunity to explore some issues in greater depth by convening again in the afternoon. So I hope that you will join us if something comes up that piques your interest and you'd like to know more. One of the main points that we'd like to make this morning is that the Alumni Schools Committee offers some really wonderful opportunities to connect with prospective students and to support the admissions office's recruiting activities in whatever communities you live in. And we need additional volunteers everywhere. We've got over 3,000 volunteers at this point, and it's wonderful. But we are also doing more recruiting activity than we've ever done before, and I think that's going to generate the need for more alumni interviews and more opportunities to talk at college fairs. So we are hoping that we can encourage as many people who are interested as possible to join us and push us up beyond the 3,000 volunteer number that we've reached. ASC volunteers primarily interview prospective students, and they also engage in what we call ambassadorial activities, which consists of representing the university at college fairs or information sessions or yield-related activities. And each of these opportunities presents a different type of, there's a different need for advanced preparation, and that's one of the things that we wanted to talk about this morning. Getting ready to do an interview is a little different than getting ready to represent the university at a college fair, and that's a little different than being involved in a yield-related activity. So we wanted to touch on some of those differences this morning. So I would like to introduce my presenters, my co-presenters. First, Madeline Wirtz, who is I got this wrong in the earlier session. Madeline is a graduate of the class of 2007 and is also an assistant director in the admissions office. She supports me a great deal in the work of the Alumni Schools Committee. She's going to be providing a brief overview of some of the topics that we talk to prospective students and their families about. This is a very abbreviated version of what's usually a much longer presentation, but we wanted to at least be able to give you a sense of the kinds of questions that you might be receiving when you're representing the university at a recruiting-related event, and some of the questions that you might find yourselves having to answer. Then we're going to follow with a PowerPoint presentation about the alumni interview, both how to conduct an interview and also how to write up a report. The PowerPoint presentation will be conducted by Albert Chang, who is a member of the class of 1993. He's an Alumni Schools Committee chair in the Bay Area, San Jose area. He's also an Alumni Board of Governors member. And also Coco Van Merendonk, who is a graduate of the class of 1964 and is our Alumni Schools Committee chair in Brooklyn and Queens. And finally, to talk about the ambassador opportunities, Libby Pearson is going to join us. She's the ASC chair for the Chicago region, graduate of the class of 2005, and a former admissions officer. Did I forget anything? No. Okay, Maddie, thank you.
Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you here. Like Carol said, my name is Maddie, and I work in the Office of College Admissions as an assistant director. And beyond my admissions counselor responsibilities, I also assist Carol with the Alumni Schools Committee. And most immediately, for the past month, I have been helping find alumni to staff college fairs around the country, and it's been a very fun and exciting experience for me. I've had really great conversations with alumni who are getting ready to represent the university, and it makes me really excited about the work that I do to see how excited they are about representing and supporting not only the admissions office but also the university. So as Carol said, she asked me to say a few things about, what we say to prospective students and their families when meeting them, and that's a pretty hard role to do in 10 minutes, mostly because I could easily fill the hour with what we say to prospective students. But we really wanted to emphasize the cornerstones of a University of Chicago education, and we broke these down into 10 different areas, and obviously you could break these 10 areas down further, and also additionally, it's important to know the nuts and bolts of the application process, what's required in the application and the deadlines. But these are things that you can find on the website, especially on the Alumni Schools Committee website, which is asc.uchicago.edu. So to touch base on these cornerstones, we wanted to emphasize that the University of Chicago is a small liberal arts school within a large research institution. And this means that students as undergraduates have access to lots of research opportunities, that they're working with graduate students at an advanced level, working with professors and other faculty members and their peers at an advanced level, which is really important. We have the liberal arts foundation of the core curriculum, and beyond the critical thinking skills that this affords a prospective student, you also have to think about it in the context that when a prospective student is applying to the University of Chicago, they're applying to the college. So they're not applying to the College of Arts and Sciences, College of Architecture, so that when they do declare their major at the end of their second year, they're making a well-informed decision after this core curriculum. It also enables them to take classes in different departments. They're not applying or petitioning to take classes if they're a classics major and they want to take an econ class. So I really, I don't think that prospective students realize how important that is and how valuable that is. And so it's important to emphasize that. We have a multitude of programs of study, 49 majors, 24 minors, 45 study abroad programs. These programs happen all over the world, and they're fantastic. They're constructed by faculty, they're taught by faculty, and students are taking classes with University of Chicago students all over the world. And then we have the New Chicago Studies program, which allows students to study the city in which they're living and studying in. Advising, 25 full-time advisors, and these advisors don't do anything else besides advising. They don't teach, they don't research, so they are there for the full benefit of the student. The pre-professional advising system is something that's fairly new in the way that we advocate for it. It's always been an option for students, so students can be a classics major and think that they want to go on to medical school. That's how it always has been, and how it will be. And so these students can reach out to these advisors, and so the programs are broken down to Chicago Careers in Health Professions, Chicago Careers in Business, and Chicago Careers in Law. And the neat thing about the health professions advising system is that they don't talk to students about becoming an MD. They talk to them about being, in any health profession, which is really important. Again, this interdisciplinary approach to their education, which can be felt throughout the university. We are a residential college, so there are 11 dormitories, and we just had a new dormitory that was finished a couple weeks ago, and it holds 800 students. And when the housing office was thinking about the construction of this dorm and how do you feel this strong sense of community when you're living in a building that holds 800 students, community is something that you want to feel wherever you are at the University of Chicago, and you especially feel it within the house system. So these houses, on average, have 70 students in them. They have resident heads who are adults who are affiliated with the university. They can be full-time faculty members, they can be staff members, they can be graduate students, and they are a support system for the students. They're not going to tell them to go to bed at 10 o'clock at night, but if they need help with a class, my resident head from my first year was a math professor, and we went to him for math tutoring all the time. I babysat for my resident heads, so they're real people who really want to help the students. They'll have study breaks during the week, Sunday morning brunch, movie night, that kind of thing. There are also house lounges in the resident residence halls. So every house has its own house lounge that has a TV, couches, a pool table, foosball table, study spaces, kitchens for the students to cook in. And then beyond the residential college, students have 400 student organizations to choose from. These range greatly, and these are student-run, and so they take up a lot of the students' time, and they're very important to them. We have 19 varsity athletic teams, 38 club sports, and 30 intramurals. Intramurals, anyone can participate, both the varsity athletes and the novice who has never played broomstick hockey. I'm sure there aren't too many people in this room who have played broomstick hockey before, but it's a very popular intramural sport. So is intertube water polo, and so are the traditional basketball and volleyball sports. And the varsity athletic teams, we do have a football team, and it's very strong, and we consistently send our soccer teams, our basketball teams, our volleyball teams to the NCAA championship every year. In the arts, as you were walking through the hallway today, hopefully you saw Bill Michael advertising the new Logan Center. That is a huge bragging point for us right now. It's projected to be finished in 2011. It will have space for both the visual arts and the performing arts. And, the arts is a very vibrant culture on campus, and we want to, advocate for that as much as possible. Internships, networking with alumni, thinking about jobs after graduation. This can all be done with CAPS, the Career Advising Placement Services. They do a wonderful job working with students their first through fourth years, having them think about their summer internships, having them meet with upperclassmen about the internships they had, networking with alumni about the career paths that they've had during their lives, and working for alumni during the summers through the Metcalf internship program, which is really fantastic. And of course, emphasizing the city of Chicago. That's where we're located. Students use the city of Chicago as a resource, in the professional capacity, but also just getting out, socializing and exploring the city of Chicago. It's a fantastic neighborhood. I'm biased. I grew up in the city of Chicago, but it's a wonderful place to live and study in. So these are pretty much the cornerstones that Carol and I wanted to touch on. Obviously, the University of Chicago is a dynamic institution. It's ever-changing. We just won two more Nobel Prizes in the past week. So it's hard to keep up with, even working at the university, it's hard to keep up with all the, the changes that are happening, the wonderful changes that are happening. So as long as you keep these cornerstones in mind, that's really what's most important. I do also want to talk a little bit about, if you're thinking about where a student is coming from in their stages of the college admissions process. So if you're out there on the road, meeting students at a college fair, and you have a student that comes up to you and says, tell me a little bit about the University of Chicago. This is a student who doesn't know much about us. And you really have to sell them on the University of Chicago and explain to them why it's such a wonderful place. And typically how I answer that question, it's a very broad question and a hard question to answer, is ask them a question in return. Tell me specifically, academically, and extracurricularly what you're interested in. And then, when you get to the interview process, the student is a little savvier. You'll probably have a pretty in-depth conversation about the university, and I'm sure the student will come prepared with questions. And so that's, a very different role, but both are equally important to the admissions office, the Alumni Schools Committee, and ultimately the university. And my philosophy is if you forget all of what we discussed today, you can't walk away with any points of information, that's fine. As long as you're there representing the university and you're excited to represent the university, that will carry over to the prospective student and make them excited about the University of Chicago. And additionally, all this information is on the ASC website, asc.uchicago.edu. And if you are not an Alumni Schools Committee volunteer, I strongly encourage you to sign up. It's a really great experience. And Carol and I cannot thank you enough for the work that you do, or hopefully will do, on behalf of the Alumni Schools Committee and the admissions office. It helps us do our jobs. It's vital to how we do our jobs. So thank you. And I'm going to hand it off to Albert.
As far as interviewing is concerned, I wanted to continue on this theme about representing, being an advocate and representing the university. So you can think of the interviewer as having two particular roles. One is being the eyes and ears of the university and representing the applicant, but also being a representative of the university to the students, to prospective students, to applicants, and to parents. So really, it's many different activities. Like I said, being able to assess the student and engage in a conversation with the student, answering the student's questions, but also answering the admissions office questions about the student as well. Okay. Now, are we going to send this deck to people?
Oh, this is on the. It's already on the flash drive.
Okay. So one thing I want to say about this is actually a condensed version of the interview handbook, right? So whatever you don't capture or whatever I don't mention now, you can just go to the handbook, or you can go online and get this electronically. But you can see there are a lot of different things going on in the year. We basically start right around now, not only receiving interview requests from students, but also farming those requests out to the different chairs. And the chairs then in turn pass those requests on to the interviewers. We do the interview requests in 3 rounds. Early action, which starts around now, regular notifications, which starts in a couple of months, and then transfer students. I kind of lump together transfer early and transfer regular together because it's about the same time anyway. I believe the application deadline for early is November 1st, and then the report deadline is usually about 3 weeks after that, 20th, right? And then for regular notifications, about January 1st for the application deadline, and I think February 15th plus or minus for the reports. You want to keep those deadlines in mind. Another thing as well is the follow-up, right? So once we're done with the once we're done with the interviews, submitting the reports, the admissions office considers the candidacy. Students are informed of the decision, and then if they are admitted, then we ask the interviewers to potentially follow up with the people that they interviewed. And that typically happens around the March, April timeframe, in time for them to make a decision as to whether or not they want to come on the campus and visit campus to aid in their decision to accept their offer for admissions. The next one. Okay, so basic process, right? We talked about how students begin their application online and they can request for an interview. And once that request is received, it's the Alumni Schools Committee in Chicago farms out the interview request to the chairs, myself and the other chairs here. In which case, the chairs typically have their own way of figuring out who to assign the particular interview requests to. So as an interviewer, once you receive the interview, we ask that you respond to that request as soon as you can, right? So if you get it on a Monday, we ask you to respond within a couple of days, whether it's by a phone call or email, just to say, just introduce yourself. Most of the time you can try to arrange for the interview there, but if you have a busy travel schedule and you can't talk then, we ask you to please still contact the student as soon as you can and say, you know what, I'm going to call you again in a few more days or whenever you have time. But it's really important to make that initial contact as soon as you can. Okay? We do prefer, if it's possible, that you do call the student first and then email. But in case you either can't reach the student by phone, just use, the technology is available to you, and email is fine. You want to arrange to set up the interview. Interviews should be conducted in person if possible. But again, we're in the internet age. We typically try to match, I shouldn't say typically, we can hopefully match interviewers with prospective students based on geography, but there are situations where you may not be anywhere near this person you're supposed to interview, in which case you can conduct the interview by phone, or in some cases you can even conduct it by Skype, right? There's no particular rule saying you can't do that. Right? These are technologies that are available to us. You should take advantage of them. The preference is that when you can meet a student face-to-face, you should do that first. But if you can't, you have all alternatives. Once you're done, we ask that you try to write the report as soon as you can while the memory of the interview is still fresh with you, and then submit it online. Okay? Currently, the preferred method of submitting an interview, written report, is online. But in case there are problems with that, there are other alternatives that your chair can mention to you. Now, you know what I'm going to mention about this is, so something new for Chicago area interviewers is that the admissions office is going to open up the admissions office for Chicago area applicants and Chicago area interviewers to hold the interview on campus instead, right? And you can find more details about that on the website. Other than that, this is just, just use common sense in terms of how you're going to contact the student. Okay, so this eye chart. Really, it's in terms of when you should how you should conduct the interview, what channel, whether you do it by in person or by phone or by Skype. You want to use common sense. The preference is by phone first. By person first. Failing that by phone. Failing that by Skype. But you also want to use, like I said, you want to use common sense when you do things like that. So some things to keep in mind. I think, in my 10 years of experience as a chair, and other chairs can chime in with their own experiences, but in talking to other schools, I really believe that we differentiate, the University of Chicago differentiates the whole interview experience from other schools and the way that we approach it. In the same way that we approach our education, right? We are not a school that's about rote memorization. We're a school about dialogue, the conversation, about big ideas. And that's what we want to get across in this interview, okay? From the initial contact all the way to the actual interview itself, you want to put the interviewee at ease. Now, keep in mind, this person's 17 years old, right? Maybe has interviewed once or twice before, but is not really interviewing for a job, right? So we're not trying to do a pressure interview and rapid fire questions and things like that. It's really about the conversation. What is the person thinking? What is their train of thought? What are their big ideas, right? And then therefore, how can we best capture that? So you want to put the student at ease. We suggest, the admissions office wants to try to keep the interview down to about 30 minutes. But my personal opinion is that, if you're having a good conversation, let it go longer. I would say no more than 60 minutes. And then I would try to think of ways as you do more and more interviews to try to make the interview as efficient as possible. Because the truth is that it's time out of your schedule and time out of the student's schedule, right? Very, very important part, which I think there's another bang box on the next page, but it's very, very, very important. I cannot stress this enough, how that the interviews are to be kept confidential, right? So whether it's not talking about the interview with other interviewers, or more importantly, not talking about the interview with other students, and also not doing things to expose the students to, not doing things to expose the students. So for example, in terms of meeting the student in person for the interview, we suggest some neutral location, right? If you want to go to the student's house to interview, that's fine, but I tend to go to either a Starbucks or something else like that. You would definitely want to avoid the student's high school as a location, right? Because that basically broadcasts to everyone this person's applying, right? Another good place, I personally think, is your place of employment, right? One principle here is that you should not feel like you have to travel to the student, okay? If you want to meet the student halfway, that's fine. You should also feel comfortable making the student come to you, okay? Up until the point of your home, right? And so that's the last place. That's the other place where we ask interviewers to refrain from holding the interview, is at home. In previous discussions, there have been some exceptions, and I want to say the principle behind this is, again, you want to make sure that the student is comfortable, and so if you must hold it at home, you want to make sure that someone else is there, not necessarily in the same room, but someone else is there in the house, and that it's in an open room in the house as well, again, to make the student feel comfortable. Then as far as telephone and Skype, just use common sense. Whenever is mutually convenient is fine. So we talked a little bit about setting the tone and the importance of putting the student into ease. And again, the idea is to put the student at ease, to calm their nerves down, and to be able to let them feel comfortable enough to open up and have that dialogue about the great ideas. What are their great ideas? What are their great books? Coco's going to talk more about writing the report, maybe even some topics. But whatever you focus the question on, it works a lot better if the student is at ease. It's also very, very important to keep in mind the way the interview report. I apologize, I'm jumping into your part a little bit. The way the interview report fits into the whole application review process is, this is one piece of information out of many pieces of information that the admissions officer looks at. Okay, what are the other pieces? Well, the formal application itself, where the admissions officer is going to see their GPA, their classes, all their extracurricular activities, their test scores. They'll also see their own essays, and then the recommendations from professors, and maybe a few other things I'm forgetting. But what's the point of all that? Well, the point of all that is the least effective interview, and therefore the least effective interview report, is one that just regurgitates what's on the application itself. Okay, so asking the student what their favorite class is a good starting point, but you can't end the conversation at, oh, the student's favorite class is calculus. Well, admissions officers know that already, and you've done nothing to really get into a conversation to understand what the student is about, right? So really what it is you want to drive to the how and the why. Okay, when you're engaged in dialogue, you want to think about the how and the why. Why is this student doing this? Why did the student sign up for this activity? Why do they like this? What are their passions, and how do they come about it? Okay, so if it's calculus, well, why is it calculus? Well, maybe it's because their father's an engineer, or they had some math camp or something like that, or whatever. But you want to get into the how and why, and this will help differentiate this student among all the other students. Which leads me back to an issue that, to something I said before, which is a point of view on thinking about this whole interview process, aside from what I've said, is that the role of the interviewer is really to bring justice to the applicant, okay? Because the application itself is just flat, right? And what does it say? It says, these are the classes, these are the grades. And the flat application becomes a little more colorful when the student submits their essay or essays, and a little more colorful when the professors submit their recommendations, and even more colorful than when the alumni interviewer submits their insight into the student. And the best you can do is to bring justice to the student. Every student has a story. What is that story, and can you bring that story to light? So going back to the dual role of the interviewer, we talked before about how you are both the eyes and the ears on behalf of the university on the students, right? So you want to ask them questions about themselves, but you're also representing the university to the students. So you're talking about your own personal experience. Some of the things that Madeline was talking about in terms of the dorms and extracurriculars and things like that, which all comes down to the line that the interview is supposed to be both informative and evaluative at the same time. So it's not just you asking questions to the student, how and why, it's, so what questions do you have about Chicago? And you're actually selling the university as well to the student as you're doing this. This is a list of potential topics. I don't know, Coco, if you're going to go into any more of these. This list is not meant to be an exhaustive list of things that you can only talk about. It's just a starting point in case you need some ideas about how you want to approach the conversation. Some questions that worked for me are things like, what are your own personal great books, right? Another good conversation topic would be, what do you and your friends talk about, right? Or what are you thinking about today, right? Whatever it is, you want to get the student to open up and really understand, what they're about. So this is just a starting list, and as you go about in your interviewing career, you can ask your chair or other interviewers for ideas as well. That's it. Well, that was quick. And now Coco will go from interviewing. Oh, sure.
I think when I first started doing these interviews, I felt that they were, I'm used to doing job interviews, right? And it's a different kind of interview, this kind of job interview. So it took me a while to figure out, not a while, but I had to figure out exactly what I was going to, be focusing on in these interviews. So I thought that was a distinguishing point that I had to learn about. And then the other thing I think is interesting is that the interview only gets easy for me when the student starts talking about something that they're interested in, genuinely, or excited about. Until you get to that point, they're nervous, you may be nervous, there's tension, but until you get to that point where they're talking about something they're excited about genuinely, that's when it gets easy.
Right. Right. So it's about finding what their passion is and getting to talk about what their passion is.
Yeah, whatever that is. It could be movies, it could be books, it could be, I don't know.
Exactly. Right.
Some things have been touched on before, but I think it's really important to know that if a kid requests an interview with an alumni, that means that the kid is probably not going to be going to the university, which also means that when you interview this kid, you are really going to probably be the only human being from the university that this kid is going to see. So we will talk in greater detail about your role as ambassador, which brings up a little bit of a conflict with what you mentioned earlier. You are interviewing this kid to assess his candidacy in the college, but you are also there to provide him with information about the school, to provide him with to make him feel that this could very well be a good school and a good fit for him. So it's not, you've got this funny dual purpose to this interview. So you are going to be the human being who is going to see this kid, and your task is going to be to give that human picture. You're actually going to do a live sort of observation of this kid. And that's a piece of information that a lot of the committee members aren't going to see because they, as was said before, they're looking at the SAT scores, they're looking at the transcripts, they're looking at lists of activities, they are looking at the essay, and that probably does give a pretty good view of what the kid is like, but they haven't actually seen the kid. They don't really know what it feels like to be in the same room with that kid. So somehow or other, this is something that you're going to have to convey in addition to conveying whether or not you think he's going to be a good fit for the university. So how do you write that report? Well, first of all, one thing I've got to say right off the bat, the minute that kid leaves the room, go to a computer or take a piece of paper and write down every single thing you can remember about that interview. Because, it's going to fly away. Just even if it's little jotted notes, even if it's first impressions, whatever it is, write that down. Get that data, because you're writing a report and that is your data. And I don't know how good your memory is, but, it's good to have it in black and white. Okay. That's one piece of advice. How do you look at that blank piece of paper to write this report? Well, basically, your report is going to be a description of the conversation that you had with the kid. So if your conversation was in depth, if you said, what are some of your favorite courses, and he just lists them, try to elicit, as Albert said, a little bit about why. One of the questions I have found to be quite successful with students is, did you ever take a course that turned out a lot differently from what you thought it was going to be? And I had a kid tell me that, you know, she was never interested in whatever it was, you know, but in the process of being persuaded that this was a really interesting thing for her to look at, I got the impression that she was open-minded, she had intellectual curiosity, and, you know, this was a great thing to be able to talk about in the report about that kid. So that helped a lot. You want to, in this report, focus on a few of the big key topics that you covered in that interview. You don't want to list everything you talked about. You want to just pick a couple of those topics, particularly those that involve the passions. I think it's also not bad to include some comments about your first impressions. Ginger came in. She seemed extremely timid, but the minute she started talking about her two great interests, skydiving and medieval architecture, she really came to life. You know, I mean, these are things that put the flesh on the kid. And that's the kind of thing that these guys in this admission committee want to read about when they're ensconced in, I have 2 minutes left, ensconced in statistics, okay? All right, okay, keep it short, keep the tone respectful. Try to do it in a couple of paragraphs or so. And actually, what I want to share with you is what the admissions committee has said is important for them to glean from your report, okay? What would the student bring to a classroom and to the community? Would the student really enjoy the life of the mind on our campus, or the life of anything else on our campus? Would the student grow and thrive? What kind of a roommate would this person be? What are his passions? I mean, I think you'll get an idea of what his passions are when you ask him what they are and when he starts talking about his favorite subjects and stuff. But again, not just the list. He really lit up when he started talking about underwater basket weaving or whatever. And then I think this is kind of important and was alluded to. Is there something that you discern about this applicant that might not be on the application that would be worthy of comment? Okay, then you write that report quickly as you can. I mean, not a quick writing, but get it finished quickly. And then you have to submit it by getting a CNET ID and just sticking it in. The faster you do all that, the more useful it's going to be, and the less agonizing to you it's going to be. You're not going to be ridden with guilt that you still have to do it, and the ASC person is going to be sending you those little reminders, you know, whatever happened to Ginger, you know. You want to do this quickly, and it really can be I think a very, very important part of the application. Okay. You do have a candidate who's going to say, this is the best kid I ever interviewed, and he wasn't accepted. This is several months down the line. What's wrong with you? You have to explain to interviewers that this is a small part of an application. You did see an important part. You saw the kid in the flesh, but there's a lot of other stuff there. So you have to put everything in perspective, and you have to tell your interviewers, yes, I do appreciate what you've done, but there's more to the picture than you might have seen. Okay? Thanks. Bye.
Hi, guys. I brought my bag of tricks. So I'm Libby. Once again, I'm going to talk about being an ambassador, which mostly means college fairs and other events that alumni ask to do aside from interviewing. And since we're having some Chicago area volunteers come into the office on Saturday mornings, we also want Chicago area volunteers to come and volunteer at some of our on-campus programs. The sort of what we call schmingling, which is a cross between schmoozing and mingling, just like talking to families, making them feel at ease. So the interview is a super important part of being an ASC volunteer. I think that college fairs are also really important because that's where you really sort of win hearts and minds and convert people to the University of Chicago. I was a religious studies major. So it's where you can reach out to families who may have never heard of the university, even families who live in Chicago or near Chicago, and tell them about the opportunities we have and really get them interested for the first time. So what can be challenging about college fairs, though, is that in the interview, you know the student has applied. They probably have some level of knowledge about the university. But in a college fair, you just get everything. Anybody who walks in the door can come to your table. Usually college fairs are organized by alphabet, so either someone's walking by all the universities of, or they're walking by all the colleges that start with C. So that's where you are in their mind. You know, it's not like, oh, I want to see the top 10 universities or all the major research universities or all the people in the UAA conference. No, it's the universities of something. So just as an example, I was recently at a high school called Queen of Peace, which is on the southwest side, and really near a bunch of high schools that send us a lot of applicants every year, but it was somewhere that people really didn't know us. So there's this continuum of, you know, not a clue to UChicago as first choice, and sometimes entire high schools can sort of be on the not a clue, in the not a clue place, and it's because maybe they haven't sent us any applicants. Maybe it's a new high school, maybe their college counselor doesn't really know us, you don't know. But at Queen of Peace, most people were not a clue, and they thought we were UIC, which is a problem because we were also next to UIC, so like they kind of walked up to us and then they sort of saw University of Chicago and they're like, oh, no, 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 and then they walked like 2 feet to the left. But at this high school, we had a family come by who had sent their oldest daughter to the University of Chicago. She'd gotten married in Bond Chapel, the whole deal. They loved us, so you really sort of never know what you're going to get. You got to expect that students aren't as savvy as the ones you interview, but you can meet some people who have always wanted to go to the University of Chicago. So who goes to college fairs? It's all ages. You interview seniors, but you can get freshmen at the University of Chicago. You can get 4-year-olds. You know, it's fun to sort of joke with them. It's a little early to be looking for college, but you know, you're talking to parents, you're talking to the entire family, and it's really important to make a good impression as an ambassador. It's great to also meet alumni parents, and sometimes you can even recruit new ASC volunteers while you're at these fairs because they're like, oh, I wanted to do this, you know, why didn't you come to this other fair? And I was like, because you were not a volunteer, and if you were, we would have been there. Yeah, so you get questions that I find a little difficult, and I find it better to sort of think about these questions beforehand and sort of have an answer in your arsenal, in your memory, because at college fairs, everything's happening very quickly. You know, people are walking by your table, they may not want to spend too long with you, they want to spend probably between 30 seconds and 3 minutes with you, so you gotta answer these kind of difficult questions really quickly. Tell me about UChicago, so hard. You know, where do you begin? Maddie gave a lot of good pointers about the kinds of things we talk about, but you never know what that student wants to hear. So it's a good thing to sort of say, well, what are you interested in? What kind of college do you want to go to? Most often we sort of get the class rank or GPA or the SAT and ACT requirements. We don't have any requirements. Kids love to hear that first. But then we have this piece, that we call the travel piece, that's on the table that has like these super high SAT and ACT scores in it. And a lot of times that people look at that and say, oh, no, I don't have that. It's a good thing to sort of talk about, and if they ask what SAT do you require, it's a good thing to say, we don't really answer that question. Say, we read applications holistically. We really focus on essays. We really focus on the entire applicant. We're looking for intellectually curious students. So you didn't answer their question, but you answered something that they had, if they knew more about the University of Chicago, they would have thought to ask that. It's the more important question, I feel. A lot of kids will just come up and ask for a major we may not have. When I go to fairs on the south side, I always bring a pharmacist with me because everybody on the south side of Chicago seems to want to be a pharmacist and be pre-med. So they'll say, do you have pre-med? We don't have pre-med, but we want to answer the question in a positive way. We want to say, we send tons of people to medical school. We have this great health professions advising office. By the time you're done answering, they should forget that we don't have pre-med. You know, they should think, wow, I could be a great doctor if I go to the University of Chicago. They have so much support for someone who's interested in the things I'm interested in. A lot of times, though, students will come up and they'll ask about a program that requires a certification that we just don't offer. So engineering, you have to be a certified engineering program to produce engineers, and we're not yet. There's a guy out there who is, has stuff about our new molecular engineering program that we're trying to get off the ground. So there's research opportunities in engineering, but we're just not a certified engineering program. So if you want to do that, this is probably not the place for you. And then the financial aid issue, we also print the tuition in this thing that people like come by and pick up, which I think we should stop doing that. We should just say, because when people ask what the tuition is, I always just say, it's really high. And then I tell them about financial aid, because that's the question I wish they'd asked. So it's a good idea to sort of, like, they come at you with these questions, and then you tell them, what should you really be thinking about? You should really be thinking about, like, instead of what are the SATs, how do you make decisions? What's the tuition? You should answer, how much are you going to pay as a family? You're going to pay based on your means, because we have great need-based financial aid. So it's a good idea to just, again, like, look at these questions. It'll be on your thumb drive. It'll be posted on the website. And think about, like, your few-second answer. Think about any anecdotes about yourself or friends of yours from college. You can say, oh, my friend went on to get a master's in architecture, and he's designed this great building, or something like that. Yeah?
How do you answer the question about financial aid?
I say we're need blind in admissions and explain what that means. It means that we don't make decisions based on whether you've checked the I need financial aid box. Some people don't know that. And then we meet full need. And then maybe talk about something like the Odyssey program, where we don't give loans to students who's come from families that make below $60,000 a year. This is all on the website. You can read all about it. But just like mention how great the programs are, how generous the financial aid is. I know a student who found it cheaper to go to the University of Chicago than their state school. You know, it's hard to answer those questions because you never know. You know, the family won't know what their financial aid situation is until April. So they may think it's really expensive, but it may turn out not to be. Or they may think they qualify for a lot of aid and they don't. So you just can encourage them to apply for need-based aid and leave it at that. You know, but we're not financial aid experts, so we can't really, you know, give assessments. Okay. Oh, you did go on. Okay. Yeah, so emphasize all the things Maddie talked about. To inform yourself, definitely go to the ASC website, the college admissions website, look at the University of Chicago's website briefly maybe before you go out to a fair, see what the news items are, how many Nobel Prizes we won last week. And then Maddie will always give you a call, or you can call her or Carol and sort of have a conversation over the phone about if you have any questions that you may think of. And then, of course, we give out your admissions counselor's business cards. So the high school you're at has an admissions counselor at the U of C. We give you a giant stack of cards that we want you to hand out at the fair if they have any further questions. So fairs are, like interviews, have their challenges. One of the challenges is this sort of 30-second to 3-minute window that you have with the family. And the University of Chicago, depending on where you are, can be really popular. And you could have a line 3 families thick. And that's wonderful, but you want to keep things moving. You know, it's not really the time to get into the philosophy of a liberal arts education and all of your thoughts about Thucydides and should we be teaching the publication more. So it's, you know, we have this, people come and get one of these. This is the only thing we hand out. It has the majors, it has, you know, this tuition and stats and the varsity sports. We want them to fill out one of these. We call them key cards in the office. My advice for getting people to not steal your pens is to uncap them all and keep the caps, because no one's going to walk up with an uncapped pen. Well, people do though.
And then people will also like leave the pen they stole from the last college at your table. So like you have a bunch of UIC pens and then people get really confused. But yeah, people will probably just like walk up, grab one of those, stick their nose in it, have a short conversation. It's important to keep things moving. If they want to do something further, if they're near Chicago, you encourage them to visit. If they're not near Chicago, you hand out the business card, encourage them to get in touch with their counselor, to go to the website. If there's an info session coming near you, if there's a deadline coming up, talk about that. Tell them what the next step is so that they know that the contact is going to continue after they leave your table. Parents can be a little wacky. They're there with the students. Sometimes they're there without the students. It's like orphaned parents where the student is home doing their homework, which they should be doing, and the parent has been sent out to collect all that information. I would say if you see a student and a parent together and the parent's being pushy, look at the student and talk to the student and give things to the student and try to sort of set a good precedent of like, this is the student's process and you should be talking directly to the student. Exhaustion, you'll be given a chair, use it liberally. If no one's at your table, it's good to stand up when you're talking to people, but if no one's at your table for a few seconds, do sit down. You're given water, keep hydrated. And then if you don't know the answer, always just hand out the business card, say, I don't know. It's way better to do that. You gain more credibility by saying that you don't know the answer than like making something up. Like sometimes I make up how many study abroad programs we have because I always forget. But always just, stay positive, smile, give them the positive version of an answer, even if it's no, we don't have that, tell them what we do have. Is that? Oh yeah, and we also want to have you come on campus. So schminkling is pretty easy. It's just a way for people to kind of circulate and get and talk to people while the families are sitting there waiting for a tour. They're just sort of like staring at each other like, this is so weird, we're at college. And you can just come up and say, where are you from? How was the traffic? It doesn't have to be heavy. You could say, ask if they have any questions, but sometimes they'll say no, and it's like, oh, okay. But it's a good idea to just sort of keep them talking and smile and keep them engaged and give them a good first impression of the university. That's schmingling in a nutshell. Yes? And now I guess we have a tiny bit of time.
Sometimes questions come out of the schmingling.
Sometimes questions do come out of the schmingling.
Schmingling can be 3 questions.
Yeah, and it's also good if you're schmingling before an interview for you to say, hey, that's a great question to ask your interviewer. So do you guys have any questions?
I want to emphasize the part about the parents. So in a fair, the parents there, the parents being more assertive, you actually be more engaged with the student. Yeah. And that also carries over to the interview, where sometimes if a parent will accompany the student to the interview, no covering parents, you can invite them to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Be diplomatic about it. The interviews with the student, not with the student plus the parent.
And you could also offer to talk to the parent after the interview. Maybe that'll appease them a little bit. But yeah, the parent should. Did you?
Yeah, I do think on the parent thing, I do think it's interesting because I come from a part of the country where not many people have heard English in Chicago, and I do think that the selling to parents is an important point of attack in terms of marketing.
It is.
I have to sell both of them, frankly. And frankly, the parent is more knowledgeable, more mature, frankly, than the kid. So I have to do, the pitch has to, if it appeals to them, it could be even persuasive to the kid. But I recognize the point of this kid's process. I guess the other thing I would say is, I think, are we thinking about doing any type of activity in terms of, and we probably do this in Chicago, right? But elsewhere, receptions for admitted students. Is that something that is?
That's something that comes up every year. That's I'll turn back to you.
Yes, that's something that we're going to be looking at a little bit more carefully once we're past this caucus. But yeah, we are definitely going to be looking at that for the coming.
And I'll just tell you, the experience that we see out in the field is that the Ivy League schools hold these receptions for admitted students, and it can be, there's a window after they receive their acceptance letter when they have to accept it, where all these receptions happen. And that's the critical decision point for our strategy here is, are we going to roll something out of whatever season we're about?
Right, and it's something that we're going to be looking at, and we're also going to be looking at in conjunction with the Alumni Schools Committee chairs. Coco, was there something else?
No, I was just going to say that has happened in New York, and probably should happen. I don't know what the statistics are on the yield for when it happened, when it didn't happen, whatever, but it seems like a very, very positive thing to do.
Right, and again, that's something that I'm going to need the assistance from all the ASC chairs to figure out what is that, and then implement that in a way that's sustainable across our entire Alumni Schools Committee. So with that, thank you very much. I hope that you will join us again this afternoon, because we'll have an opportunity to go a little bit more in detail on some of these topics that we just breezed through this morning. Thank you very much for your time and your attention, and thank you to the presenters. And I think now we're going to get our pictures taken. So